But first, stock down. And it's funny we talked about the Colorado-Nebraska game because I feel like we set these narratives for both of these programs that have drastically changed and veered into different directions since. So Nebraska is here because I went from being entirely confident that they would be bowl eligible by Halloween to now wondering, can they get bowl eligible? Like,
Wow.
we're now in that position where they have the nation's longest streak of not playing in a bowl. And they're at 5 wins, which is the worst place to be because they were at this last year. And then they had a series of heartbreaking losses. They've got Ohio State. UCLA should be beatable. USC could be beatable. Wisconsin playing a lot better. Iowa, there's always a lot in that rivalry game. And Iowa, will be up for that game. It's just hard. Like, there's not an obvious, again, when in the preseason, when you're looking at the schedule, Indiana was the obvious, like, oh, yep, that's a win for sure. That gets them bowl eligible. And now you have this situation where Dylan Raiola has been really struggling for the last few weeks. And you just got crushed by Indiana in year 1 of a rebuild when you're supposed to be ahead of that in year 2 of a rebuild. So it's just a really tough situation for the Huskers that had so much positive momentum early in the season, and they're really in a lull right now. And I think Raiola particularly is. And I guess that's not terribly surprising because he is a true freshman.
Yeah. So let's just talk about this, like, path to getting to a bowl. So playing Ohio State, and in the preseason, we had looked at this as like, oh man, both of these teams will probably be 7-0 coming into this game. Neither one is, by the way. Neither one is, by the way. And so, like, OSU coming off of a bye week, like, they've been festering with that loss to Oregon. You've got this Nebraska team that just got their pants kicked in, and it's not a good opponent to have to play because it's still Ohio State, very talented team. So, like, that becomes more difficult. UCLA is a team that you should be able to beat, but we also saw UCLA beat Rutgers in a game that I don't think any of us thought the outcome was going to go that way, even with some of the injuries Rutgers had. So, like, antennas go up a little bit. USC has not played well. They're a very talented team. Wisconsin's a matchup opponent. Iowa's a matchup opponent. Like, these games are tricky. I do think they get to bowl eligibility. I think they could probably pull off at least 2 more wins this season.
I do too.
It's certainly like a weird spot for them to be in. So there's that. The Dylan Raiola piece is so intriguing because I feel like we need to have a legitimate conversation about Dylan Raiola. And I think he has played impressive football for a freshman. I don't think it's been impressive football after the first couple of weeks. And I think that's actually okay because he is a freshman and he's got to learn. And I would feel weirder about this if he didn't have ups and downs and make mistakes and have bad games, because I think that's the best way for a player to learn. And I think this last outing was one that could probably hurt confidence. And so they've got to be careful in the way that they coach him through that. But most of these performances aren't ones where it's like, oh my gosh, like this kid is, he's going to lose his confidence. He's going to be broken. I think a lot of these are just like, hey, dude, this is how we learn how to become a better player. And so I think it's unfortunate for Nebraska, and especially the way Raiola started, where we were like, this dude could be like kind of a freshman phenom. But in terms of his development, I think that this is going to pay dividends for the next couple of years that he's on campus.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I agree. I think they're going to get bowl eligible. I would like them to. I think they could get a decent bowl. They get up to 7-8 wins, maybe.
Yep.
But like you said, these are matchup opponents. So those games could really go either way. And we'll have to see how they play down the stretch. But hopefully they get that win over UCLA and can kind of breathe a little bit for the first time in a few years. Second team for stock down, I want to talk about Auburn. It's not going well. Like, you went out on a limb to give Hugh Freeze another chance in the SEC. You're supposed to be good offensively when you bring in Hugh Freeze. Like, that's what you're selling. You're selling high-powered offenses. They don't have that. They have turnover-prone quarterbacks. Doesn't matter who's quarterback. Auburn's now lost 4 straight games. In 5 of their last 6, they have not beaten a power conference team, despite 4 of those losses coming by 10 points or less. Hugh Freeze has said, like, he's never had a season like this in 32 years of coaching, where not a single game ended up going our way in the end. We're not making enough plays in critical moments. I mean, it is possible here. We talk about, like, look at the rest of the schedule for Nebraska. Could Auburn lose out. So they've got Kentucky. So Kentucky, matchup opponent, like that's a chance. But they've got Alabama, A&M, Vanderbilt ranked. They've got a 5-1, currently 5-1 ULM team. Like Louisiana Monroe's good. That's their schedule. This is not going to be a good season. Like they're definitely not going bowling. But like, you know, the buyout is prohibitive. We don't need to necessarily say that like Hugh Freeze is on the hot seat, but you can clearly say like this is not working the way that anyone anticipated it would by bringing him back into the SEC and saying with all of his baggage, it's still worth it. It doesn't seem to be worth it so far.
No, and I'll say, Hugh Freeze, you let me down because we were perfectly ready to throw in the towel on Missouri and stop talking about them. Yeah. You had them on the ropes and you let go. And it's really unfortunate for our sake that we still got to entertain this Mizzou thing. Now, for the Auburn perspective on this, everything you said is 100% accurate. Like this is supposed to be a guy who is like, you know, king of offense, whatever you want to call him. You bring in Peyton Thorne, who had many struggles in the Big Ten at Michigan State. And it's like, oh yeah, we're going to turn this guy around. The last 2 years is like, no, he looks like the exact same player. Like this is the same guy. And it hasn't looked very good. The idea that you lose close games is something that I look at. And I say that is 100% a training, coaching, motivation thing. Because the players play well enough to be in these games and like you don't have a plan for them or you have not motivated them or trained them in a way that they can close them out. I look at that in a lot of ways and I point to coaching there. And then here's the other thing that I do think it's interesting for Auburn is if you follow the transfer portal or you follow recruiting at all, they have had some money to throw around. They've been able to get some names and they've been able to entertain some recruits, potentially get some flips here as we get closer to signing day that a team this bad should not get. And next year is going to be the one. I think if they have another bad season, there's going to be a lot of people who are donating saying, I'm not giving you any more money because we get you these great players and you don't know what to do with them. That is a very dangerous spot to be in.
Well, and just that, like you opted not to bring in a quarterback.
Yeah.
You know, like you're making decisions when you do have the support that could help you make a decision another way. You're saying, nope, we're good. And then it's not working out. So you're right. I mean, the next year is going to be huge for Hugh Freeze. I mean, I think he's going to enter, assuming the season ends the way we think it's going to end. I mean, the seat will be warm. And regardless of buyouts, regardless of buyout structure and things like that, like Auburn has always set the market on buyouts and the willingness to make changes. So we'll have to see. Joshua, the last team for Stockdown is a team that you have had very strong feelings about all season long. So I want to give you the floor.
All right. So how about Michigan? Okay. And
how about them?
They lose to Illinois. Really in a game where Illinois out Michigan, I think is the best way to put it. They ran the ball pretty well. They only threw it for like 80 yards. They were able to get some takeaways. They had a big special teams play that factored into it. Like Illinois did the Michigan thing to the University of Michigan. They have a real problem right now. And we alluded to it earlier, and I'll get to the makeup of the coaching staff here in a second. If you flip on that tape from the game against Illinois, I think you look at the offense and said they left a lot out there. I don't think they're giving Khalil Mullings the ball enough, which is a problem in and of itself. And if you have to drop back 32 times to win a football game as the University of Michigan with that quarterback room, you're probably setting yourself up for a loss there. But I'm looking at Colston Loveland. He's getting open. There's some other guys who are getting open. It's just not accurate, right? Like none of the quarterbacks have really worked. And then for a defense, and I thought their pass defense played better. It's been an issue for them this year, but that came at the expense of giving up 5 yards of carry. And if you take out the big play on the fake punt, still giving up a little bit around 4 yards of carry for that defense in that front with some first rounders out there doesn't make a lot of sense. But I look at Kirk Campbell, the offensive coordinator, and I look at Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, and it is a steep drop-off from what we've seen the last 3 years from that coaching staff. The execution is not where it needs to be. I think the offensive game plan is more of a I'm the coach and I know what to call rather than these are the players and this is what they do well. That's always bad. And Wink is just like a stubborn guy who's been around football for a long time and likes to run what he likes to run. It is a little bit ugly. And Jake Butt, one of our friends, he played football at Michigan, does a great job on the Big Ten Network, was an All-American tight end there. He's scared they might not make a bowl game this year. And it feels really dramatic when you hear it. But like this game they've got this weekend against Michigan State, they're sitting at literally the same spot. Yeah. Michigan State's played much better these last couple weeks. We know that rivalry is just like a nasty, gritty rivalry. Who knows? Who knows? They're in dire straits right now, coming off of a championship a year ago.
Yeah, they are. And I think that championship and uncertainty hanging over them with NCAA stuff, is why Jerome got the job and why they wanted him to get the job. But I agree. I mean, I think there's going to be some hard staff decisions that he's going to have to make because of what you just outlined. They're not playing to the strength of their personnel. They're not adjusting in game. And they're not playing, like they're not doing anything well right now. And I think that's the biggest problem. I think they're going to end up having to cycle through all of these quarterbacks like again, because they're all continuing to make mistakes. The ones that can throw the ball a little bit, throw it to the other team or fumble. Yeah. And then Alex Orji, when you put him in the game, you have no threat of a pass game. So
and he doesn't run it that well either.
Right. So it's just like there's nothing you can do at this point with your personnel. We'll see what they do with quarterback for this game. I know Sherrone Moore said he wasn't sure, but if they had to make the decision on Monday, it would have been Jack Tuttle. We'll see. But you're right. Michigan State coming off probably their most complete game of the season, and a really nice win over Iowa last weekend. So there's a lot at stake in Jonathan Smith's first rivalry game, Sherrone Moore's first rivalry game as the head coach. But yes, absolutely, that is a staff and coordinator decisions to keep an eye on because obviously they're not going to make a change for Sherrone.
Let me just get this to you real quick. So we mentioned Michigan State coming up. Then they've got Oregon. They've got Indiana, Northwestern, and Ohio State. So they have to beat Michigan State and Northwestern. And I don't know how much of a shot we're giving them in those other games. Wow. Those are all teams that are, like squarely in the Big Ten championship college football playoff hunt.
So this is the game this weekend.
This will determine a lot. Yeah. And I don't want to be this guy because I think the character of the players up at the University of Michigan, the brotherhood that they've built over the last couple of years really changes this idea. But I mentioned the fact that they've got some high draft picks. And if they lose this football game, like who is to say that those guys finish out the season? It's not an uncommon thing to see players say that they want to wrap it up. And I wouldn't blame anybody for doing it. I'm not saying that I have any information telling me that they would, but like that's the part of the season that we're starting to get into. And it would feel like really strange to see a team that just won a championship get to that point in the bad season curve. So huge game, a lot of stakes in this one coming up this weekend.